Log Horizon, Volume 1, Chapter 5, Part 4. This way, Mewtwo. Are you alright, Miss Serara?
Of course!
Serara desperately followed Nyanta, who was running in the lead. Shiroe, the young man who'd come to rescue her, was right behind her.
So he's a friend of Nyanta's. He looks a little hard to please, but he seems really smart.
She thought, remembering Shiroe's sharp eyes. She snuck a glance behind her. Shiroe was scanning the area and talking in a low voice, probably a telechat. His training showed through in the fact that he didn't stumble. The Brigadiers seemed to have been suspicious of the simple housing district for a while, and they were searching it exhaustively. Serara thought that their friend lists must have alerted them when she'd moved from the safe house into the Susukino zone. In that case, it was only a matter of time until they found them. The layout of Susukino is a simple grid, and most roads intersected with each other at right angles. Even if they ran through the back streets, if the enemy had enough members, they'd eventually be caught. Knowing that, Nyanta and Shiroe had chosen to force their way through instead. They said it was a gamble they'd have to take at some point if they were going to return to Akiba. Naotsugu and Akatsuki hadn't been spotted yet, and Shiroe probably contacted them via telechat. They were currently moving toward the broad avenue to the west, hurrying but not panicking. In the end, their guess proved to be correct. Brigantier's guild members were loitering at the gate as well. Susukino is a non-combat zone. What do you think they're doing? They're probably planning to let us walk for now. Shiroe had said for now, and it really would be only temporary. The guild would mount their real offensive once they were out of the non-combat zone. Serara thought that was the strategy the Brigadiers had put together, and that Shiroe and Nyanta were fully aware of it. Do you think so? Nyanta didn't question Shiroe's abbreviated comment, possibly out of consideration for Serara. However, the calm in his voice was completely different from what it usually was. It was a difference Serara couldn't quite define, but it made her shiver involuntarily.
What should I do?
Her voice was shaking. Demicus had grabbed her wrist once. The mere memory of his grotesquely muscle-bound arm and his ugly smile made her heart wilt. Let's see. Shiroe seemed to be gazing into the distance. She saw the expression silently drain from his profile. Abruptly, he looked far more intelligent and much, much colder, and she felt a little afraid of him. If they're going to let us out, let's take them up on it. If we can get outside the city, so much the better.
What?
At Shiroe's words, Serara's eyes widened. If they left the city, they'd be outside the non-combat zone. If they were captured, they'd have to fight, and the Brigadiers had enough members to guard all the avenues leading out of the city. Serara was sure that if it came down to combat, she, Nyanta, and Shiroe would all be killed easily. No matter how skilled Nyanta and Shiroe were, and no matter how high-level Shiroe's reinforcements were, there were only 5 of them altogether. Besides, that 5 included Serara herself, and she wasn't even level 30. If the Brigadiers decided to PK them, she was sure they wouldn't have a chance. Of course they wouldn't. They were far too outnumbered. Even if we manage to get away without a fight, we'll need to make them slip up. If they start pursuing us even when they're this close to us, even after we're away from Susukino, they'll probably follow us until doomsday. The enemy must know that you have people helping you, Miss Serara. You wouldn't have been able to keep yourself fed otherwise. I assume they also know you don't have very many allies. Taken together, that means that the Brigadiers plan to surround and PK us once we've gotten a little distance from the non-combat zone. They'll try to take out your allies first, then they'll break your will and get you under their control. I think they'll have settled on that course at this point. Shiroe's words sounded completely analytical. To Serara, he seemed detached from the situation.
But they'll kill us! How can you just—
Serara. It's alright. You mustn't let yourself get so flustered. If Shiroichi says that that's how things are, then that's how they are. And if he's here, then there's nothing to worry about. Nyanta's words were casual and relaxed, completely divorced from Serara's anxiety and terror. Shiroe had gotten information on the Brigadiers' members and fighting strength from Nyanta, but as far as Serara could see, their situation was fairly dire. She didn't understand how they could be so calm. Captain. Yes? If you fought their leader one-on-one? Shiroe asked, and Nyanta nodded. Now that is a stupid question. His response startled Serara. She'd heard that Nyanta was a veteran player, but fighting PKs was nothing like fighting monsters. That had been true even when Elder Tales was an online game. Unlike monsters, which had a limited range of attack techniques and were driven by instinct, there was no telling what players would do. The tension during combat was dozens of times greater, and even the most skillful fighter would make mistakes. Or at least that was what Henrietta had told Serara. Serara had never seen a player so skilled that they could consent to a PK battle this readily. We'll go with this strategy then. First, the three of us will leave the zone together. Once we've come far enough that we won't be able to run back into the town, the Brigadiers will launch their PK battle. Once we take out the enemy boss, we'll use the opportunity to make our escape.
But that's ridiculous!
Serara felt herself go pale. That wasn't a strategy, it was practically leaving everything to chance. It seemed almost like suicide. She tried to speak up, to take him to task over it, but she couldn't even find the words. Perfect. You haven't changed a bit, Shiroe. On top of that, incredibly, Nyanta seemed to be in total agreement with Shiroe. When Serara turned, startled, Nyanta widened his narrow right eye at her. I haven't ripped someone to pieces in a very long time. Make sure and watch closely, Serara. It's alright, I won't let them lay a finger on you. At that, Serara swore to herself that she'd brave any terror, if only Nyanta would fight to protect her. To read along with audio light novel Log Horizon or to read on your own time, buy the light novel.